I grew up learning one rule very early. If something went wrong, it was my fault. If something went right, it belonged to someone else. No one ever said this rule out loud. It lived in the pauses, in the looks exchanged over my head, in the silence that followed every accusation. My older sibling needed constant care. Everything revolved around managing crises, preventing meltdowns, keeping the household from collapsing. I learned to be quiet, not because I was gentle, but because silence caused less trouble. When something broke, they didn't ask who was there, they asked where I was. When my siblings struggled, I was told I should have known better. When I succeeded, it was treated like an inconvenience. Praise was rare, suspicion was constant. By the time I was a teenager, I stopped trying to explain myself. Explaining required someone who wanted to listen. I left home as soon as I could. Not dramatically, not angrily. I just left. At first, I wasn't thriving. I was surviving. I worked too much. I slept too little. I made mistakes I had to pay for myself. There was no safety net, no one to call for advice, no one to soften the consequences. I learned through exhaustion. Therapy came later, then left, then came back again. I learned that healing wasn't a straight line. It was a series of plateaus, long stretches of effort followed by small moments of relief. I kept my life intentionally small. Few bills, few obligations, room to breathe. That choice changed everything. Years passed. Without anyone noticing, I built a life that didn't include blame as its foundation. I became a parent. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but consciously. I learned what it meant to listen before accusing, to ask questions instead of assigning fault, to protect instead of deflect. My children are safe. They are heard. They know mistakes don't define them. I don't think about my family of origin very often anymore. When I do, there's no anger left, only clarity. They didn't fail because of me. They failed because they needed someone to carry what they wouldn't face themselves. I was convenient. They struggled financially later in life. They blamed everyone but themselves. At one point, they even blamed me. By then, their words had lost their power. I had learned something they never did. Responsibility doesn't destroy you. Avoiding it does. I didn't become successful out of spite. I became stable out of necessity. I learned to bet on myself because no one else ever did. And somehow, that turned out to be enough. I am not extraordinary. I am not untouched. But I am no longer the person everyone learned to blame. And I will never teach my children that love requires a scapegoat. Sometimes, being blamed isn't about whether you're right or not. It's about convenience. When a system needs someone to carry the weight, it looks for the person least likely to fight back. This next story happened far from home, but the role was painfully familiar. The one who took the fall. I joined the company quietly. No dramatic entrance, no connections, no one vouching for me. I was hired because I was qualified and willing to work harder than anyone else. At first, that worked in my favor. I stayed late. I fixed problems no one wanted to touch. I filled gaps that weren't technically mine. When deadlines were met, the team was praised. When something went wrong, eyes drifted toward me. Not aggressively, not openly, just enough to make the direction clear. I noticed the pattern early. Mistakes made by senior staff were called miscommunications. Errors from management became unexpected variables. But when I missed a detail, it was labeled a lack of professionalism. I tried to be more careful, more precise. more invisible. That didn't help. The more dependable I became, the easier it was to place responsibility on me. I was the safest option. No political fallout, no retaliation, no risk. Then came the project that changed everything. A major client, a rushed timeline, decisions made above my pay grade. I flagged concerns, documented them, asked for clarification in writing. I was told not to worry. When the project failed, the room went quiet. The director spoke first. This shouldn't have happened. Someone mentioned my name, not accusing, just suggesting. I didn't interrupt. I listened as my role slowly expanded in their retelling. Suddenly, I was responsible for choices I never had authority to make. I was offered a choice afterward: resign quietly or stay and accept corrective supervision. I declined both. I submitted my documentation, my emails, my timelines. Then I left. No exit speech, no dramatic confrontation, just absence. What followed wasn't immediate. At first they managed, or pretended to. Then issues resurfaced, without me there to absorb the blame. The client requested an audit. Processes were reviewed. Emails were pulled. The story shifted. I heard about it later from someone who still worked there. Meetings became tense. Leadership changed. Policies were rewritten. My name was never mentioned again, not as an apology, not as acknowledgement. I didn't need either. By then, I had a new job, one with clear boundaries, clear roles, clear accountability. I work less now. I sleep more. I'm not constantly bracing for impact. I learned something important. Some systems survive by sacrificing the same people repeatedly. Leaving doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it's the first honest thing you do. I wasn't bad at my job. I was just standing in the wrong place when they needed someone to fall.